Hello, welcome to another Becoming Modern Man. We are running Hogaak Vine, and this time we're running up against Nauseam, which is a combo deck that I haven't run into in a while, to be honest. So this is our opening hand. It's not insane. We've got a Vengevine, we've got a Neonate, Hogaak, and a Gravecrawler. So we kind of need it a little bit more to make this deck, this hand really go off. My plan here is to play the Neonate. Then probably sack it to discard Vengevine into the graveyard and hope that we can find another 1-drop, preferably a black 1-drop, and then we can potentially also cast Hogaak, or get closer to casting Hogaak anyway. So this hand isn't crazy but has some potential. So we're on the play here, we're going to run out Neonate. As I discussed, no need to crack this now, particularly if our opponent's going to end up playing some sort of graveyard hate, which is very possible in the current metagame. Then we might as well just keep the Neonate back for now. When plays Darkslick Shores, passes a turn, so it doesn't give a great indication of what they're on. We draw Stitcher's Supplier, which is pretty much the best thing that we could have drawn, I guess. Yeah, kind of tricky to think of anything better that we could have drawn in this circumstance, so this is really nice. We're going to be able to put Vengevine into the graveyard, and we'll also get to see what we can put into the graveyard here with Stitcher's Supplier. So we are playing Stitcher's Supplier before we play our land drop, in case we hit any Bloodghasts, in which case we definitely want to play our land after we've milled, so that's the plan there. Just going to fetch up a basic swamp here. I don't think it really matters, to be honest, but we didn't know what our opponent was on, and there's no real need for red mana at this current point, so I'm going to sack the Neonate, get rid of the Vengevine. We also milled another Vengevine, so that means we can get 2 Vengevines into play. We draw a Vengevine off the instant Neonate as well, and I feel like I've said Vengevine quite a few times in quick succession, but yeah, so we are going to be able to cast our Gravecrawler here, which is the second creature of our turn, get back both these Vengevines into play, which is pretty tasty, and we also, with Stitcher's Supplier and Gravecrawler in play and at 5 cards in our graveyard, have exactly what we need to cast Hogaak. So we have just put 19 power onto the battlefield on turn 2, which is pretty insane, it's particularly when we had a fairly unassuming starting hand, and Stitcher's Supplier is kind of really the engine that got that running. And so we're going to be able to attack for 8, and then we're going to be able to attack for 19 next turn. So our opponent is in a very sticky spot, and fortunately for us, they don't have anything to say about that, and fairly unsurprisingly, so they concede, and we have game 1 in hand. So looking at sideboarding, we didn't really see anything from our opponent in game 1 apart from a Darkslick Shores and a Seachrome Coast, I think it was. So my theory based on the colours was that there was some sort of Thopter Foundry deck, some sort of artifact based deck. So I did take out the Leyline, or the Leyline can be good against Thopter Foundry, but I brought in the artifact hate here on the assumption that they were, well, after seeing that we were a big graveyard deck, bringing in some sort of hate. And so that's what I went for. Wear-Tail, obviously the sort of the bear hedge, given that we don't know exactly what hate they're going to be running, and then Shenanigans just seemed appropriate given their colour situation. So we'll change those up, and in terms of the cards we're cutting, we're probably taking a Gravecrawler, maybe an Altar, and possibly a Neonate or a Vengevine. And yeah, no, and the Leyline, I suppose. So any of those cards seems good to cut. Okay, so here we are with game 2. It's our opening hand. It's not terribly good, to be honest, but we do have 2 Carrion Feeders and a Hogaak. Yeah, I mean, this could have been a mulligan, but I suppose if we can get something to go with this, we can potentially get an early Hogaak into play. So I'm going to play Sleight of Hand into then Pentad Prism, which gives away that they're ad nauseam to me, which isn't a deck I had played against for a while, so it was a little surprising. Stitch Supply is a nice one off the top. This is just such a great card in this deck. It does kind of everything we want it to do, and it's kind of card that you really want to have in your opening hand where possible. It's just so powerful for putting cards into the graveyard, which is such a huge engine for us. So I'm going to play Stitch's Supplier again before our land drop in case we get Bloodghast, which we do in this circumstance. I'm going to sack Stitch's Supplier because we know that we're going to be able to get a second black creature in the form of Bloodghast into play if we want to cast Hogaak this turn, which I think there's a good chance we do. We find a second Bloodghast through the mill, so we're going to be able to put 2 Bloodghasts into play here, and then use those to cast the Hogaak. I'm going to play the Carrion Feeder out as well, basically so we can keep this Faithless Looting in the graveyard, which might be of usefulness later down the line. So again, put into play a fairly ridiculous amount of power very early on, even with a fairly unassuming hand. And place Temple of Deceit. Just going to attack here. From paths, so we're going to sack in response. I'm looking at killing this Pentad Prism. Basically, Ad Nauseam wants 6 mana and then it can go off. So we want to deny our opponent mana if possible. The alternative here is to play Altar of Dementia and sort of try and go off that way. But I think this seems like the safer option. So opponent goes down to 12. Can sack these Bloodghasts to our Carrion Feeders to pump them up. Just because we might as well, because it's just some added value given these Bloodghasts are going to come back anyway. I suppose alternatively, if we'd had the Altar in play, we could have sacked the Bloodghasts and started milling ourselves and sort of furthering our game plan, which would have maybe been nicer, but I think possibly riskier given that our opponent can potentially kill us with 6 mana fairly easily. So that's Angel's Grace plus Ad Nauseam, which is like the sort of bare minimum of what they need to do. Opponent plays Spawns of the Vault. I think drawing the card they put on top, so I'm fairly sure it's Serum Visions, so they know that Serum Visions is on top because they scried it there, and they use Spawns of the Vault, so they don't lose any life and they just immediately reveal the card that they wanted to draw. Opponent plays Temple of Enlightenment, scries. Plays Serum Visions. And another Serum Visions. And another Serum Visions. So they've drawn a lot of cards. We are going to attack here to lead off. Put opponent down to 2, so not quite enough to kill our opponent. We can play Altar here, sack the Bloodghasts and mill ourselves, see what we can find. Unfortunately nothing too exciting coming out of that. Get the Bloodghasts back. And we can play Hogaak, pitching most of the cards in our graveyard. I end up passing the turn here, and I think that was just the wrong thing to do in hindsight. I mean, we've already got lethal anyway, so just having Hogaak on board in itself is not that valuable. I think we should have just continued to try and mill ourselves and try and find more pieces, or alternatively started milling our opponent, which I'll discuss a bit more, I suppose, when we get down the line. So it turns out our opponent has Angel's Grace and a Simian Spirit Guide, I think. Maybe 2 Simian Spirit Guides, I can't quite remember. Yeah, 2 Simian Spirit Guides. So they're, despite only having 4 lands in play, they managed to get the 6 that they need to actually go off here. I don't respond to the Ad Nauseam, which in hindsight was the wrong thing to do, so we should have just milled our opponent as much as possible. Most likely, I'm fairly confident actually that they only have 1 win condition in their deck, so if we were able to get rid of this Lightning Storm, which is their win con, then I don't think they would have been able to win the game, and then they'd just have lost on our turn because they would have had negative life. And also with Lightning Storm, the way the Lightning Storm works is that they pitched lands to to actually kill us, so they actually need quite a lot of lands in hand after they've ad nauseamed to actually hit us for enough damage. So every land we milled into the graveyard would have been one less land that they could have used to lightning storm, and again that could have potentially allowed us to win. So our opponent goes off here. I concede. Actually, in hindsight, I think I might have got played here, because our opponent only actually has 2 Simian Spirit Guides left. Oh yeah. So I think I conceded this game, but I'm not actually sure whether they can make the necessary mana, given that they use 2 Simian Spirit Guides as part of their as actually part of casting the ad nauseam. So I think I made a lot of mistakes here, to be quite honest. I should have made our opponent actually kill us, given that they probably can't produce the mana. I don't know if they played a land this turn. Did they play a land this turn? Well, actually, maybe they still have a land drop to play, so that would have been enough. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If we say they had a land drop to make this turn, which I assume they did, then they can still lightning storm with the Simian Spirit Guide. So we didn't completely punt the game, but we actually should have just milled them and just sacrificed everything we had to hit as many cards off. I don't think that necessarily would have stopped them from comboing, but I think as a matter of fact we probably would have got to lightning storm and put that into the graveyard, and at which point they just don't have a way to kill us. So that's what we should have done in hindsight, and that probably would have won this game for us, but mistakes were made, and we're going to go into game 3, which I guess gives you additional content at the very least. Okay, so here we are with game 3. This is our opening hand. It's not insane, but we does have Stitcher's Supply, which, as I say, is just a really good card for this deck. And then we can Stitcher's Supply into Altar of Dementia, which can put a lot of cards into the graveyard. So all this hand isn't great, and not the fastest for sure, which is important given that we're against a combo deck. I think this is decent enough. Interesting actually as well that I haven't mentioned, we saw all of our opponent's deck due to ad nauseam, and they didn't have any graveyard hate, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if that was like a failed to sideboard, person not testing with the sideboard, or whether they just chose not to. But I don't think it was worth the risk of not bringing in any answers to graveyard. Well, I mean, we got artifact answers anyway because they're useful against cards like Pentad Prism, so I guess that's the way to play that. So our Stitcher's Supply mills Bloodghast, so we get that into play. I'm just going to run out of Bloodghast here. It's the altar here. Sorry. Sack the supplier, get as many cards into play as possible. Into the graveyard as possible. We find a bridge from below, which is nice. We could potentially sack the Bloodghast here and get a token. I don't think that's. I don't think it necessarily makes a huge difference. I suppose we could attack for 2, but then our Bloodghast was not gaining haste, so I don't think that makes a ton of difference. I get concerned our opponent misses their second land drop to memory, so I get concerned that they might have a Ravenous Trap, so I decided to cast Hogaak without any Altar of Dementia or any other sort of shenanigans, just so we can get that onto the battlefield without getting caught by a Ravenous Trap, which I thought my opponent potentially had. And then, given that they didn't answer that, I decided to sort of keep on going. And it seems like they don't have any immediate answer. So, yeah. Our opponent's got a Lotus Bloom on suspend, sorry, so that they did have another play, but it turns out that they're just like not running... and not getting their land drops, So there is some concern next turn that we might somehow lose out, given our opponent's going to have 4 mana. But as I say, I'd already figured out my mistakes from the second game, so my idea was definitely to mill our opponent out as much as possible if they do try to go off, or do manage to get into position to go off. I'm not sure how far we could have gone with this. I'm not sure whether I played this right. We certainly have a lot of potential to start milling our opponent. We actually found a 3rd Bloodghast, and we have 1 Bridge from Below in play. So we could have really gone to town on them with Hogaak. Potentially we've actually got a mill kill here. I think we probably should have just sacked the Hogaak after attacking and seen if we could mill our opponent out. It's a reasonable chance that we could have done with these Bloodghasts all ready to go, and if we find like any number of Bridge from Belows in our milling, which we can do a lot of with these tokens and Hogaak and the Bloodghasts, there's a reasonable chance we could have just milled our opponent out. I decided to pass the turn and not do anything too risky, but so potentially this could have ended pretty badly. Although we can mill our opponent for quite a lot if they do somehow manage to go off here with 1 land and a Lotus Bloom. So Lotus Bloom comes off suspend. Opponent has a Simian Spirit Guide, and they cast Ad Nauseam. I just let them do it because they didn't play Angel's Grace and they're on 4 life, so they're almost certainly going to die. So, yeah. They play and they just draw the deck for no reason because they just die. I guess just for fun. Ad Nauseam resolves and then they lose to the loss of life. But yeah, as I say, even if they had somehow found a way to go off there, I think we responded to the Ad Nauseam. Had it been an actual killer Ad Nauseam and just milled our opponent as much as possible, and I think that would have been more than enough to get the job done, given that we've got Bridge from Below and things in play. So we could have, and potentially we could have just milled them out before their turn, but I didn't actually go for it there. But in hindsight, that's probably would have been the better play. But never mind. Okay, so yeah, that was the match against Ad Nauseam. Kind of punted it. It seems like a really favourable match for us. Altar of Dementia is pretty great against them because milling them actually hurts them pretty badly, and then just generally we obviously have the speed when our good hands come together.